Well, let's get the reaction now from the Labour Party. We can speak to the Shadow Scottish Secretary, Ian Murray. Thank you very much for being with us. Well, let's talk about this resignation. What is your reaction?
Well, we're not shocked because this is the second ethics advisor that this Prime Minister's have. Don't forget that Sir Alexander Allen, who was the previous ethics advisor, resigned 2 years ago because he wrote a report into the current Home Secretary bullying staff, and the Prime Minister backed Priti Patel, and therefore he resigned. So Lord Geidt came into the role from then. And although his statement tonight doesn't really say very much, he has in the last few weeks said that the Prime Minister's ridiculed the ethical code, the ministerial code. He's said that he's been skirting around the edges of the ministerial code, and I think his ethics advisor had just had enough.
So you ridiculed the ministerial code? Why do you say that?
That was a few weeks ago when he had produced the report in terms of the Prime Minister's attitude to the ministerial code, when he said that he should have been explaining all the way through Partygate
how he was complying with the ministerial code. He said that he should explain why he didn't believe he broke the ministerial code.
And he used the word ridicule, the ministerial code. So it's little wonder that Lord Geidt has had to resign, because it's quite clear that the Prime Minister has broken the ministerial code. He will now go to the Privileges Committee, and you know, the history is there for people to see that what he's been saying in Parliament and what's been happening in Downing Street. And you know, the Prime Minister will now no longer get an ethical advisor. I mean, who would want to do that job? It would be trying to find, similar to trying in Hannibal Lecter a dentist, I would imagine, in terms of what the job would entail now for someone who wants to try and keep this Prime Minister ethical.
I mean, it's difficult though, isn't it? Because we don't know why he resigned. Yes, we can obviously make the suppositions. We know, of course, he is in front of the Parliamentary Committee. We know, of course, that he has expressed frustration about how the Prime Minister dealt with Partygate. But it's not a smoking gun unless he tells us why he resigned, is it?
Well, and he may tell us why he's resigned, but the word ethics and this Prime Minister don't really go very comfortably together. And if you're the Prime Minister's ethics advisor and trying to advise on him sticking to the ministerial code, he's been fined by the police, he's been shown to at least have lied in Parliament, whether that be intentional or not, and the Privileges Committee will look at that. So the job that he's been asked to do is almost an impossible job, and he's decided, obviously, to leave his role. And I hope in the next few days he does what public service should do and what's in the public interest, and tells us exactly why he's resigned and the details of the information that the Prime Minister has got in terms of his resignation.
So you think, as a public servant, he should explain the reasons for that?
I think it's in the public interest to do so. This is the second ethics advisor to resign with this Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister hasn't been listening to the advice that they had employed to give him. He's already said a few weeks ago that he thinks that the Prime Minister should have been explaining why he was sticking to the ministerial code or not in terms of Partygate, and he hasn't done that. He's used the word ridiculing the ministerial code, and today he's decided to resign. And I think the public will look on this and realise that the Prime Minister has now lost 2 ethics advisors in the last 2 years, and that really is quite unacceptable in the current environment.
OK. We've been talking a bit about Rwanda today. Keen to get your opinion on that. Would a Labour government cancel the agreement with Rwanda and stop sending asylum seekers there?
Well, of course, because we wouldn't have it in the first place. You know, it's quite clear that this is unworkable, it's unethical, it's costly, and it's indeed illegal.
So would you cancel it then?
We would, yes. I mean, it's pretty clear. I think Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, was clear about that in the Chamber today. She completely tore this policy apart. And let's be quite clear about what this policy is doing. It's taking asylum seekers who are crossing the Channel dangerously in dinghies, sticking them on planes to Rwanda, and if their asylum application is successful under the rules of the UK's asylum processes, they stay in Rwanda. That's unethical and it's unworkable and it's hugely expensive. And it's interesting that, I don't know if Tom said that in his interview with you a few minutes ago, but I don't know if he told you how much this was going to cost, because the Home Secretary refuses to tell us. So it's quite clear that this is a policy that's just about extending the culture wars. It does nothing to stop people crossing.
So what is your strategy then? Because this is what the government says. It says, look, we had 440 people trying to make that crossing yesterday. It's incredibly dangerous. There's got to be something to stop it. What's your strategy?
Well, what the current government are trying to do...
What's your strategy?
Well, this is what I'm going to tell. What the current government are trying to do is to take the people off those boats and send them to Rwanda. What they really need to be trying doing is have a relationship with the French and the Belgians to be able to try and stop these crossings from happening. Go after the criminal gangs. So you've got to go after the criminal gangs, not taking people out of dinghies and sending them to Rwanda. Now, you said there was 444 yesterday. That's with the Rwanda policy, so it's quite clearly not going to work, and it's unethical and it's completely and utterly unworkable, and of course it is now deemed to be illegal as well. So we need those criminal gangs taken out. Now, it's really strange that the Home Secretary spent all of her time creating a relationship with a country like Rwanda and none of her time talking to the French or indeed the Belgians in terms of this issue. We need to go after those criminal gangs to stop those boats coming across. And maybe we need another Dublin arrangement which we need to work on so that asylum seekers can be dealt with in the country they first arrive in.
OK, let's just finally, I want to talk to you a little bit with your Scotland hat on, because Nicola Sturgeon yesterday was vowing to push ahead with the idea of a second independence referendum. Now, if you look at the current polling, local elections, the current polling, everything is pointing towards a hung parliament in Westminster. It would be a lot easier for Labour, of course, to form a government in that case, rather than the Conservatives. Would you be prepared to do a deal with the SNP?
No.
No.
There'll be no deals into the election. There'll be no deals coming out of the election. And our challenge to the SNP, if Labour formed the administration as the largest party, would be do what you did in 1979 if you wish to bring in another Conservative government, or back the Labour administration. That would be
well,
the
that
way
is
we
a deal,
would do
then, isn't it? Saying that you'd back the Labour administration. That's a
well, they would have to decide vote by vote if
they
they wanted to either vote with us or vote with the Conservatives. That's not a supply arrangement. There's no arrangement whatsoever. As Keir has been clear time and time again, and as Sarwar's been clear and will continue to be clear, no deals going into the election, none coming out, because we don't require
even
them.
if it lets the Conservatives into power.
It won't let the Conservatives into power if we're the largest party, because the SNP would have to decide. The SNP would have to decide to vote with the Conservatives to bring it down a Labour government. I'm not sure they would do that. I don't think it's in their political interest to do that. And if they, like us, share the view that we want to get rid of this Conservative government, then the people of Scotland, when they're voting at the next general election, can do that by voting Labour.
OK, Ian Murray, thank you very much for being on the programme.